A friend of mine asked me for some advice on designing scrollwork patterns. So I thought I'd put together a little bit of a tutorial for everyone here. He had two questions for me. Firstly, how do you design a scrollwork pattern to flow properly on an unusual shaped background? CJ, why would you need an unusual shaped background? Well, it could be a leatherwork panel on a bag. It could be a piece of armor. Anything that you need to fit in an unusual position. Scrollwork is used on so many different types of projects, from metalwork to leatherwork, henna designs. You know, no part of a human body is a standard rectangle. So when you're doing henna patterns, which you use a lot of scrollwork for, you need to be able to fit your design to the shape of your background. So that's what we're going to work on first. Now, I already started working on a piece here, and this is one of the example shapes that my friend gave me. First off, one of the big mistakes that I see a lot of people making is trying to cram too much into their scrollwork pattern. They try to make all sorts of tiny little squiggles, and it gets really busy and really crowded. If that's the effect that you're going for, cool, that's great. But usually that makes it really hard to look at, and if you're trying to do plant-based scrollwork, which I'll get to later on in the video, then you don't really have enough room left over to do your leaflets, your side designs. So you want to make sure that you're not filling up too much of your space just with your scrolls. The scrollwork is based on plants, specifically vines and ferns. So the idea is to create that fern effect, that vine effect. And all of your ferns and your vines are going to have one main stem that has branches off of it, just like this. So when you're trying to fill a space, generally you want to have one focal point stem. I'm going to call them stems. On a symmetrical design like this, if symmetrical is what you want to do, then your focal point, you should have a separate focal point for each side. So my focal point here is right there, and it would match a focal point right there when I mirrored this image on this side. So that's exactly what I did here. I made one focal point, and when you're using a shape, like especially an angular shape that's got corners and points all over the place, usually I find that you get a better visual effect when you put the curve of your scroll towards an outward corner like this. So you want the outer curve of your main scrollwork design towards the outer angle of your shape. Now on a shape like this that's symmetrical, technically we have two outer curves because this is our dividing line here, right? So each of these diamond shapes are in themselves symmetrical, which means we could do a curve going this way. So let's sketch that out. Let's see what that would look like. Okay, so here's our main scroll shape if we put the curve towards the inside of our symmetrical pattern here. By itself, that works all right, and that's an option if we wanted to do an asymmetrical design on a symmetrical shape like this. However, with the curve facing this way, now we're kind of limited as to how we start forming our leaflets, our branches. Now if we copy the pattern from this side and use the same formula, shall we say, for designing this scroll, we've got our main branch, small one up at the top, medium one in the middle. It just doesn't fill the space right. You've got all this dead space down here. It's just kind of hanging off the edge of the pattern. So the problem is, when you're doing scrolls like this, they don't really look right unless you follow the same pattern that you see in the plants, in the vines and ferns, where from your main stem here, all of the curls on the right side are going to curl to the right, all of the curls on the left side are going to curl to the left. You will sometimes see smaller branches coming off the larger branches, and those will always curl away from the main stem that they're attached to, so they can point towards the big stem here. But then you start overcomplicating your pattern again. So we try to avoid doing too much of that. A few here and there can be really nice, especially if you're working with a large piece where you have a lot of room to fill up. But on smaller pieces, and even medium-sized pieces like this, you don't usually want too many extra side shoots. So we're still left with all of this. And you know, you can bring weird stuff off this way, or let's say you've got a very odd plant and it keeps going around instead of rooting in the ground, and you could do that too. You could bring some branches up off the base going the other direction. But in my experience, it just never ends up looking quite right. You get things that are continually folding in on themselves instead of flowing through the space. The idea behind the scrollwork designs is that you want it to spread as it flows. You don't want it to curl in on itself, because then all the energy of that piece just kind of crumples. It doesn't keep flowing and spreading and drawing your eye farther into the piece. I'm making myself sound like I know a whole lot more than I do. I really don't. Please don't think that I'm a professional artist or anything like that. This is just my personal observations and personal experience working with designs on all sorts of materials. So anyway, the main things I want you to remember from this bit are: make sure you have one main focal stem for each section of your design. If it's a symmetrical design like this, then you'll have two main stems. Make sure that main stem curls out towards the outside of your design. And make sure that you don't busy it up too much with too many little side shoots going everywhere. Your side shoots should follow the flow of the main stem. So main stem, all the side shoots on the right, curl to the right. All the side shoots on the left, curl to the left. We can do some more side shoots of side shoots. and still have it look passably good. But even there, honestly, I wouldn't do any more than this, especially if we're doing a leaflet pattern on it later. Alrighty, we're back, this time without a lawnmower in the background. Now, if I remember where we were correctly, I think we're ready to get into some different shapes. So, let's dive right in. I would recommend going way over the line with an asymmetrical design in a circle. So a circle is one of the few times that I would encourage you to busy your pattern up a little bit with some extra side shoots and extra curlicues. No matter what you do with scroll work in a circle, it's gonna look a little bit awkward. If you add some more detail features like that into a design like this, that extra little bit of busyness will distract a little from the awkwardness of using a circle in the first place. Later on, we'll come back and add some leaflets to this. We'll flesh this out as a plant type design so that you can see what this would look like completed. So we're going to leave that there for now and take a look at a different shape. So this is another one from my friend's examples, and I actually really like this one. This type of shape shows up more than you might think it would, which is lucky for us because this type of shape is really easy to work with. We've already got a very obvious direction of flow in the shape itself. We just need to make our scroll work follow that direction of flow here. So here is option one, and we've got a lot of space here, so we can get a bit more elaborate with our design here. We've got enough room to do some more branching, some more side shoots. We can get kind of fancy with this, but we're still maintaining the single main stem with its branches concept. Okay. This is how we keep cohesion in our design. We've got one main stem, that's our focal point. And we're still keeping the curve of that main stem towards these outer points, just like in that first design. We're still leaving plenty of space in and around these branches so that we can add in our leaflets later. And we're still making sure that the direction of our curlies makes sense. Okay, so everything that's coming off the right side of our main stem here, which are these three main branches, plus this little guy, are curling to the right. And everything that's coming off the left of our main stem is curling to the left. And on each of our branches, we follow the same pattern. Our side shoots are coming off to the left of the main branch that they're on, so they are curling to the left. Main branch curls to the right, side shoots curl to the left. Now, if we want to go a little bit more complex with our design, another option we have for a shape like this is to break a couple of our rules in some small ways. So this time, instead of starting with one large main stem that follows the angles of this pattern, how about we do some alternating leaflets instead? Okay, so why does this work from a flow perspective? Well, we're sticking with our cardinal rule of one main stem, okay? That is honestly one of the biggest components of making sure your piece flows right, especially if you've got an asymmetrical piece like this, or if you've turned a symmetrical piece into an asymmetrical piece like we did before. Having one main stem, one main focal point, one path for the eye to travel as it's viewing the piece is what makes the piece look cohesive and like the design flows properly. So we still have our one main stem, and it is still bending towards those outside corners in the center. Right there, see? So we've still got that bend towards the outside corners. We've just shifted it towards the center of the piece instead of over on the outside like we had it before. Now once again, we've made sure to not fill up too much of the space with our curlicues. We've still got plenty of room for leaflets later on if we're going to do the plant design. But we don't have anywhere that looks like really awkward chunks of dead space. Now you saw me change my mind in here. I was going to put a curlicue out this way. That could work, but it looked kind of weird with the other branches that I had in that space. So instead, I let those branches have a couple side shoots of their own. And once again, we're making sure that all of the branches are curling the correct direction. We've got all the main branches curling away from the main stem, right? And all their side shoots are curling away from them. So it still looks like it could be a real life plant. And that's kind of our goal with nature-based shapes like this, is to keep them from jarring the eye, keep them looking natural and smooth. So now we've got two very different designs on the same pattern piece, right? And they both flow well. But the results are totally different, okay? This is a bit more of a stylized, kind of traditional design, keeping your main stem off to one side and bringing your leaflets flowing over in one direction. And this is a more freestyle, closer to nature-based pattern. But they both work well. They both have the flow that we're looking for. So the point is, just because I showed you one way doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. Now, I've showed you a couple of other ways to do non-symmetrical patterns in a symmetrical background. But I filled out this one ahead of time, and I wanted to go over a couple of the things that I would call wrong about this particular design. At first glance, it kind of looks all right. We've got one main stem with a centered focal point here, and the branches coming off of it mostly look like they're going in the right direction. But here's a couple of the mistakes that we've made here. Firstly, this main stem is coiling so tight into the middle here that it's pulling all the energy of the piece down a drain right at this center point, instead of letting it continue to travel up and out across the rest of the piece. You're getting trapped right here. So I would fix that by moving this coil up. I would stretch it out a bit and move it up here into this corner. Now the other mistake we can see is that this branch here curls towards the main stem, and it just kind of throws the eye off a bit. When you're looking at these plant-based designs, you expect them to follow the nature of the plant, and that doesn't. So I would scratch that entirely. It's also creating some weird dead space up in here that just doesn't, is going to get awkward later on when we try to fill it up. So let's go ahead and fix those issues. Okay, we've eliminated this center drain here and its accomplice down there, and we've eliminated this awkward curl going the wrong direction up here. We've moved the main stem up here into the corner so that we're pulling the energy of the piece the whole way from the bottom up to the top and out to the sides. Where do we go from here? Let's go ahead and put this guy back up in the corner. Now, have you noticed that I like to have something in all the corners of an angular piece like this? That really helps to move your eye around the piece and spread it out to these corners so that you're not missing any potential out in the edges of the piece. This helps you avoid creating dead space, awkward blank spots up in the corners that just kind of dangle off the edge of your design. So we didn't like having our big spiral right in the center. Let's avoid that. Let's not put any branches that spiral straight into the center there. Let's put them just off from the center. Another thing you've probably noticed is that I leave my coils really open. I don't try to spiral them down too tightly. People talk about following the Fibonacci sequence, which shows up in nature a lot, and that's great. But if you try to coil it up too tightly, unless you're really going for the spirally look, it ends up making things look busy. And you don't have enough room left over to do leaflets if you're doing a leaflet design, or any background, honestly. So on a piece like this is about what I would go for. We're avoiding getting someone's eye caught in the center. We're filling out the piece and making sure there's tracks for the eye to follow to all the corners, all the edges. We don't have a lot of awkward dead space. We've got plenty of room in there to fill out our details later on. This is about what I'd be looking for personally. Alright, we've gone over creating a design on several different types of unusual shapes, both symmetrical and non-symmetrical. We've talked about how to create flow in your design and why certain aspects of it are important. Now, let's talk about finishing your piece. So my friend's second question was, how do you get from Scrollwork to Scrollwork? Well, it's actually a lot easier to do that than it is to figure out where you're going with this stuff. This is the hard part. So step one is you're going to pick where the base of each leaf is, which is usually somewhere around where it connects to the bigger stem, or if it's the main leaf like this, it might be further up along. Just play around with it until you decide you like where it's at. And you're gonna start making little curved lines, like the lines on a snail shell, okay? And they're gonna get increasingly more curved and smaller as they get closer to the center of your spiral. But you want to keep them pretty evenly spaced the whole way through. And then when you get to the center, you're going to add your little curly Q at the center of your spiral. And that gets a line of its own. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add in all the rest of my curved lines here. And this is the other reason you don't want your design too busy or your spirals too tight. You won't have enough room left over to do these little leaflets. So step number 2 is you're going to make little M's to connect each of these lines. Starting about halfway down one line, you're going to connect it to the line before that with a little curly M. And they don't have to all be exactly the same. They don't have to all be perfect. It's supposed to resemble plant life. Everyone's got one direction that's more difficult for them. Mine is this way. Got all your little lines and all your little M's. Now we've got to work on the back sides of each of the coils. So what we do on the back sides is we draw little hooks facing away from the coil. We draw a little hook, and then we draw another little M to connect it back to the stem. It's all just hooks and M's. That's all. Hook, M. And these ones will space out more than the ones on the inside. Hook, M. I think I'm going to add another leaflet in here. Remember, that's just a curved line towards the inside of the coil. And starting from the line next to it, about halfway down, another curly M. And that's your basic scrollwork shape. Now, to make it actually look like something, you just have to shade. Shading, I will admit, is not my strong suit, but this is how I go about it. First thing I'm going to do is darken up all of my stem lines. Okay, stem lines are all nice and dark and heavy. Now I'm going to go through and do the same thing for each of these curves, both on the inside and on the outside. I'm going to darken up these hooks on the outside and these curved lines on the inside. And as I go, I'm going to add an extra curved line about in the middle of each of these leaflets. Okay? Next, I'm going to go through and add what I call the veining, which is just a bunch of little lines following the curvature of the leaflets the whole way up the stems. Since this leaflet is so big, I'm just going to go through and blend in a bit more of that veining to this rib of the leaf. Now it's starting to look more like a fern. Okay, now we're going to go through and add veining like that to each of these little leaflets on the back sides of the coils. And when I do these little leaflets on the backs, I let that veining just kind of fade away up into the rib of the leaf as I get closer to the top of the leaflet. So the last step is to go through each of the riffles on the edges of the leaflets, both the inside and the outside. And you're just going to add some little hints of veining to those. And when you do that, you're going to follow the bend in the riffle of the leaf. Did I say last step? Sorry, I lied. Almost last step. Now last step. We're going to go back to these curved lines that we first started with building these inner leaflets. And we're going to add some shading from about the bottom half, bottom 2/3, in towards this center line in each of the leaflets. We'll start out nice and dark along the line and then get lighter as we get closer to the center. And there we go. Scrollwork fully leafed. Now all you have to do is pick your background color. And you're done.